This is the 46 of 46 podcast summit sessions, where we'll talk all things Adirondack, backcountry, and beyond. From high peak stories and adventures to trail tips and tricks, we'll dive deep into the heart of these mountains and the people who passionately climb them. Adirondack maps and spruce traps to bushwhacks and backpacks. It's all here on the 46 of 46 summit sessions. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. This is the first episode of the 46 of 46 podcast here in 2024, and what an episode it's going to be. I am back with a summit session this week to kick off the new year. I hope you guys all had a nice Christmas, a nice New Year. If you didn't check out the Christmas episode, How Crank the Adirondack Hermit Stole Christmas, I highly recommend. Go check it out anyways. It's a fun episode. But we are in a new year. It is 2024. Winter is kind of coming to the Adirondacks right now. We've got some snow outside, but more is on the way next week. However, this week I'm here with something that we've definitely never talked about on this podcast, and I've never even seen anything like this, period. But there is a play that is going to be happening shortly in Ticonderoga that is set in Times Square. No, not New York City. Times Square in the Santanoni Range. I have the director, playwright of the play here, Kyle Lang, with me this week to talk all about this play, when it's happening, what it's about, how he came about writing it, all the good stuff. I've had multiple podcast listeners message me about this, wanting to know more information, and that's where I heard about it. And then Kyle and I started talking, and here he is this week. But I'm going to read the synopsis of this before I bring Kyle on. This is the synopsis of the play, Times Square. Tom guides his friend Jordan to Times Square, not the one in New York City, but a small clearing deep in the Santanoni Range of the Adirondacks. From this junction, Tom waits for Jordan to complete 3 grueling climbs and finish New York's most epic hiking challenge, the 46 High Peaks. As he waits for Jordan's return, Tom experiences countless colorful characters. Teens from a summer camp, a pair of former lovers, 2 barefoot hikers, and a man looking for his dog, among others, and points them in the right direction as they try to navigate the area's frustrating maze of unmaintained herd paths. But literal direction is not the only aid these eccentrics need as they try to cope with their own misery and mishaps. Times Square is a story of hilarity and heartbreak, of unity and divergence. That is the story. The world premieres January 26th and 27th in Ticonderoga. So without further ado, Kyle Lang, welcome to the 4646 podcast.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, dude, this is exciting. This is neat. I heard about your play probably, I guess at this point, probably like a month or two ago. Couple people messaged me, and then I had no information about it, and then it kind of slipped my mind. And then when you hit me up, I was like, yes, this is great, because I've been wanting to understand what is happening, and I thought it would be a great episode for the podcast too. So this has worked out very well. So super excited to talk about this, because I just as a I work in the film industry. I like stories. I am obviously a hiker. This really checks a lot of boxes for me in terms of my interest level. So we'll get into that. But before we start, give me a little background about yourself. So you are a 46er, number 6729. So I think they're in the 16,000s now, if not very close. So yeah, that's a little ways away, a little while ago. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into the outdoors? Where are you from? And then eventually, how did this play come about?
Well, I grew up in the Adirondacks, born and raised here. Grew up in Crown Point. I now live in Ticonderoga, which I have for several years with my family. So I actually grew up in the woods in my home in Crown Point, literally in a pine forest. So it's kind of been in my DNA from day one, basically. Got into climbing the high peaks quite a bit later. I think I did my first high peak as maybe a freshman in high school. I did Cascade with my uncle. I didn't have a super big interest at that point. But once I got out of college, I just got into it a little bit more and just started, chipping away. My brother and I finished together Climbed with many other people, including my dad, my wife, a couple other friends along the way. And also my friend Tom, who's actually my mom's first cousin. He's 46er number 2818, Tom Tubbs. Shout out to Tom, the original Tom.
All right.
And so, we try to do 7 or so a year. And we ended up finishing in 2009. My brother and I was our first round. It was Tom's second round, and he's pretty close to his third round. He's not sure if he's going to get to finish his third round, but yeah, so that's basically it in a nutshell about my climbing. So
Sure. And then eventually this has led, I mean, you didn't just climb the high peaks, because obviously you've gone under a creative endeavor about, the high peaks and the mountains, which, as someone who has a whole podcast dedicated to this area and the mountains here, I can relate strongly to that urge. So how did this play come about? And tell us a little bit about it.
Well, there are these little stories that you remember from time on the trail, time with other people on the trail. And I'm sure you have them. I've heard a lot of them on your podcast. They're really entertaining. So one of the stories that the original Tom told me, my friend Tom, was a story about during his first round, doing the Santanonis without his cousin. He hiked most of the 46 with his cousin at the time, but did the Santanonis without his cousin. His cousin needed the Santanonis, so he said, "I'll take you back there, but I'll take you to Times Square. They're too muddy, they're too buggy. I don't want to climb those again. I'll just wait there and I'll just direct people." And that was just a tiny one-time story he told me years ago when we were hiking, and it just kind of stuck with me. And I was actually in Maine with my family last winter, and I was just on a walk, and it just came to me that, man, that would be a great idea for a play. And having this central character at Times Square and all these characters that I could write in. So that's basically the premise of Times Square. The difference, of course, is that, our Tom in the play is different from the original Tom in a few ways. Most importantly is that he's guiding his friend Jordan there. And Jordan is kind of, they're a little bit more than friends. She's basically, you learn through some flashbacks throughout the show that, they've had a relationship too. So that's another element of the play. So that's basically the premise, a little story, who knows what mile we were on and what mountain we were on when Tom told me that story, but it stuck with me, so.
Sure.
That's basically where it comes from.
No, it makes perfect sense for a play too. Like, even as I read your synopsis for the first time, I just thought in my head, like, I can picture this on a stage. You have the set built, and it's just this character here, and then people just keep coming, and they have their conversation, their interactions. It's fantastic. Yeah, like I said, as I read it, I could absolutely picture it, and I thought, what a great idea for a play and a story in general. And I like stories in the Adirondacks. I have written quite a few fictional and non-fictional stories about the ADK, so it scratches my itch for sure. So now, where's is the so to write a play is most of us are not writing plays, so there must be some sort of background that you have is in terms of being a playwright or directing, or like, where did that kind of come from?
Well, I had a little theater experience in college. I took a couple of courses, very minimal. I was in, of course, my high school drama program at Crown Point. I was an actor for a couple of years. So it was always this kind of passion that was sort of under the radar a bit with me. I took over the Thai High Drama Club back in 2015. And we've just produced some shows that we've been super proud of over the years. Almost Maine, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, She Kills Monsters, a lot of plays that have notoriety, some that are a little more under the radar. But I have a lot of kids in my program, and that's a good problem to have. But it's also very difficult when you have, 30 starting players on your roster and only so many spots in a lot of the plays that are out there. So a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I wrote my first original play called Alma Mater. And that is basically the premise of Alma Mater was it's this rural high school in the Adirondacks that's facing closure, state funding short. So I kind of got into that whole narrative, which is a reality for a lot of school districts in the North Country. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's a comedy, though. It's kind of there are echoes of The Office. There are echoes of, Dogberry from Much Ado About Nothing. So the principal's the central character. We had a ton of fun with that. And it's always a leap of faith to premiere original material. But we did it, and it was just really super successful. People loved the show. And my students are just really amazing people, the best people I've worked with, the kids in my drama club in my career. And they're really my muse in a lot of ways. I don't know that I would write plays if I weren't writing my plays for them, to be honest. So it's really to get them in the ball game. And then at the same time, tell a riveting story and entertain people. That's what we're going for. And they're really honest with me. If they think something's garbage, they tell me, you know what I mean? So we have that kind of relationship, which I appreciate their candor with that. So yeah, basically, that's why I started writing plays, was for them mainly. And then at the same time, we can, start conversations too, so.
Now, what's the age group of people so you said it's in Ticonderoga, you have a drama club. Is this at a high school?
Yep. This is at Ti High. Yeah.
Okay.
Ti High School. Yep. So it's grades 9 through 12. We've topped out at about 50 members. We're a little below that this year, but yeah. So a lot of kids, a lot of talented students, talented people. So
that's great. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I mean, I've been to many plays growing up and going to Lake Placid High School. Anytime there was a play, I went to it. You just kind of, it's what we did. So I can picture it very well. My wife was in many of them as well. Cool. This is exciting. This is neat. And I don't know, just the fact that it's like a story, an original story that takes place in the High Peaks is just very fascinating to me. Now, so how true to form to the story that you were told is this? How based on a true story are we talking? And then how much off book did you go?
It's very off book, just that original idea of someone bringing, someone else to Times Square. That's kind of where it begins and ends, the original Tom, he always wore a Yankees baseball cap, white t-shirt, jean shorts. Our Tom's dressed the same way. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of an homage to the original Tom. But our Tom, like I said, is guiding his friend Jordan there. And like I said, through flashbacks, we learn that there's more to their relationship. So as he's sitting there at Times Square, of course, he encounters all these other hikers, some of which you mentioned when you're reading the synopsis. He also flashes back to moments, because he and Jordan have hiked 43 of the peaks together, and he flashes back to, their first summit, which was Cascade, a time on Marcy when they were together and, being on the top of the state and how exciting that was. So the play kind of goes back and forth between, him waiting for Jordan to come back and encountering other hikers in real time, and also hearkening back to the times they had on the trail, the good times, and then sometimes, the difficult times. Relationships are complicated. So that all comes to fruition. So, I mean, if I were to give it a genre, it's definitely dramatic comedy, So we want to make people laugh for sure. There's a lot of fun in the play, but it also has some serious undertones.
Sure. No, that's great. That's great. Now, let me ask you this. Regarding the set, is the big boulder at Times Square a part of your set?
Right. It is the centerpiece of our set.
Yes. Yeah. I told my wife, I was like, I bet you it's going to be right where the boulder is, right where you can go right to Cuxacraga, left around the boulder to Santanoni, or right back over to Panther. Cool. Yep. Oh, that's so exciting.
Sure, there. And our art department, which is ran by my colleague, Brittany Shaw. She's an awesome teacher. She really helps us out with props and set pieces. And some of our kids are just so artistic. So our students have created the boulder. And one of my students actually recently climbed the Santanoni Range. I haven't been back there in years, and he had a fresh photo of the boulder in Times Square. So we're going to put some of the carvings in there with the sea and an arrow, So that's the centerpiece. And Tom kind of hangs out on the boulder for a lot of the show, honestly.
Cool. Yeah, so I could picture, like I said, when I read that, I was like, I bet you this is what happens. I can just picture the curtains opening and the lights coming down, and it's Times Square, and like maybe there's some sounds of like, nature and that sort of thing. And then the people just keep coming and going.
That's very true. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, this is
cool.
Right. So, you work in, I'm assuming do you work at the high school? Is that a good assumption?
I do work at the high school. I teach English. I've been teaching English here for 23 years, actually.
Okay, great. So you work at the high school, and you run the drama club. Now, was there a challenge for you to, did you have to jump through any hoops to do your personal story, or do you get to call the shots with that?
I'm just really lucky. I work in such a supportive district. And I'm always really conscious of that, and just, putting one's own work out there. But people around me are just so supportive, but also really honest. They would look at me and say, Kyle, if they had to do that,
Sure.
we can have those conversations. So the fact that my internet work everywhere, including, my principal, some of my friends that are in the theater field, and my students, that, they don't just get behind it to humor me. I think they get behind it because they think it's a provocative story. So I didn't have to jump through many hoops. I'm really, really lucky. It's one of the great things about working in my district is just, I've always had my artistry as an educator. I've always been able to, have that liberty to teach and direct the way I wanted to. So, and our district's really supportive of us taking on challenging material too at the same time, which is, not always the case in public schools. So we're lucky there.
Great. Now you talked about there being undertones to your story. Tell us about a little bit of those.
Well, I don't want to get too specific for fear of spoilers, but, I just think it's the nature of relationships. They're really complicated. Be it a romantic relationship, be it a parent and a child. We have a mom and daughter hiking together in the show, and they're two of my favorite characters. They argue a lot on the trail, So I just think it's just the complicated nature of relationships, some of those undertones. And I guess, you start off the 46 and it's very metaphorical in a lot of ways. It seems like this daunting task, which it is, but gosh, it just goes by really fast. You know what I mean? It's just, holy cow, that journey was a lot of miles. I'm still scarred by Cliff and Redfield.
Me too, dude. Damn you,
it still went by fast, it still went by really fast. So I guess I can give you that much at least. There's a lot of relationship arcs in the play too. Everything from a couple who kind of met online, or get along really well, and they want to choose, hiking as kind of a date day. Maybe they shouldn't have chose the Santanoni Range.
Yeah.
And we have a husband and wife, and the husband, he really wants to learn more French because every time he encounters a French Canadian hiker, it seems like they know way more English than we know French, and he feels like a failure. So he's sometimes obnoxiously trying to learn French on the trail and playing Duolingo while he hikes. We have, I think you mentioned these two that are in the hiking group where they were a couple in college, these two, and they just happened to sign up for this 80K hiking group. And oh my God, they're seeing each other for the first time in 7 years. So there are definitely some romantic arcs in play, which are really fun. But like I said, there are also other types of relationships that are talked about too. And Tom and Jordan, they have a romantic relationship, which is a part of it too. So,
and now who are the barefoot hikers inspired by? There must have been something or someone that you've met that this barefoot hikers are inspired by, because that's a very unique, specific trait that you've given these characters.
It is. And it's also very funny. I have to say, I've never, in all my travels, I never personally encountered a barefoot hiker. And that's not the case for a lot of these characters. A lot of these characters are inspired by, just kind of like the Tom story, just little moments out on the trail that you have many too. You just don't forget these little tidbits. They're kind of gold if you're a storyteller. The barefoot hikers, I think there were some national stories. I think there were a couple hikers who did the Appalachian Trail barefoot allegedly. And I've just kind of read headlines. I've never dug into that to really factually know if that's true. I'm sure it is. So it just kind of came from, maybe on the surface, the absurdity of that.
Sure.
Not trying to judge. Everyone does their own thing, but maybe somebody has a genuine reason for wanting to do that.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So, I figured maybe a friend of yours is a barefoot hiker, because they're a unique breed of people for sure, and a unique breed of even though they say actually their feet feel better, and I totally can imagine, because their feet become super hard as opposed to being tenderfoots like the rest of us.
Yeah. I wish I had some anecdote with barefoot hikers, but I don't. So,
sure.
but we have a lot of fun. Our two barefoot hikers they're just great.
Great.
Good time, and I think people really get a kick out of those two. So,
they're pretty cool. Awesome. That's exciting. Now, how much like a Adirondack lingo do you have written throughout the play? I assume probably a lot. Or Adirondack, do you reference lots of different mountains or trail stuff, or is it more so it's set here, but it could be set anywhere else, or is it very Adirondack heavy beyond just where it's set?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty Adirondack heavy. There are a lot of references to other peaks, especially as Tom and Jordan flashback to, some of the other hikes they did.
Mm-hmm.
So, you see them on the summit. Like I said, you see them on the summit of Marcy, and they're on their way to Dial and Nipple Top. So there are a lot of references like that. Faro Lake is mentioned in one scene. That's one of my favorite places in the Adirondacks. I think there's quite a bit of Adirondack lingo. And I think, there's some frustrations in there that people can relate to in terms of hiking. Herd pass can be a real pain,
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of jargon, I guess, if you will, in there as well, and including allusions to some of the other peaks and places for sure.
Cool. Now, so this premieres January 26th and 27th at the Ticonderoga High School. What time is that premiere at? And are there other times as well?
These are only 2 performances. Both shows start at 7 p.m. And it's High Auditorium. And admission is free for 46ers. We certainly take donations. I've seen some people posting online about that. Like, it's great that we're getting them for free, but we want to donate. Hey, of course, we more than welcome that. And like I said, both shows are at 7, and admission is $10 for adults, $8 for students. And then we also have a family package, which goes for $30. And tickets are available at the door only, basically. And we have a really big auditorium. I hope we sell it out. That's why we have 2 shows. So, yeah.
That's great. Now, I also hope it sells out. I'm definitely going to go. That's going to be fun. No, this is right up my alley. I'm not really like a big theater person. I just like stories. And if you have a story you wrote that takes place in the ADK, you've got my attention. So it will be exciting. Now, you mentioned before too, so we'll throw it back to something else you mentioned, because I wanted to ask you a question. The first play that you wrote, or another play that you wrote, was about, like high school in the Adirondacks loses funding because there aren't kids, there aren't families here. That's been the nature of the beast for so many high schools around the park. Like, there's probably more empty buildings in terms of high schools than there are schools in use right now, which is super depressing and super devastating.
Yes, it is.
What inspired that story? And did you do that play, or did you just write it, or did you actually have performances?
We produced it.
You did? Great.
Yeah, cool. I wrote it and we produced it. And, it was almost, Times Square has been workshopped a bit more, which is great. I learned my lesson. Alma Mater was kind of written on the fly, but it still came across really well. My inspiration for that, I look at Vermont, and the state basically came in and forced all these mergers, of a lot of school districts. So, and I'm an educator, so I'm always really sympathetic to our plight and some of the funding disparities we have out there, not to get too political, but, we have standardized testing in the state, but not all the kids have the same resources, they just don't. So there's always the threat of closures, and that's just not exclusive to school districts. We've closed a lot of our prisons. My wife works in the Department of Corrections, and, she worked at Mariah Shock, which was closing at the time. I think that was in the back of my head. So that kind of, I don't know, never-ending thread out there when you work in this sector sometimes, of closures, of mergers when it comes to school districts, is always out there. And New York State, to my knowledge, I don't think we forced any mergers, but the Vermont story was in my head, and it's just, and in these fiscal times, it always made me wonder. But that's sort of the serious part of Alma Mater. The rest is really, really fun. Like I said, if you picture, Michael Scott or Dogberry as the principal of a high school, you see why maybe the state has some issues. But,
yeah, sure.
But it's funny with our schools. One of the themes is that these central schools, they're really central to the communities. That's where everything happens. I bring my kids to basketball practice, to drama practice, to music rehearsals, to art club. They really are the center of our communities, and our public schools are super important. So that's one of the themes from that show. And my background as an educator, really, fed into that a lot.
Very cool. Yeah, I was just curious when you said it. I was like, oh man, that's because every time my wife and I drive to a couple places, if we go to Old Forge, or if we go to even out to Vermontville, you'll pass a school that's empty.
Yeah.
that's closed, and it's like it's so disheartening and so depressing, quite frankly. And just I always think back to, so you grew up in the park, so you get it. Like I think back to 20 years ago. I mean, we probably say it every time we drive around Lake Placid, let alone in other places. We're like, remember when this was like a town where people like just lived here? These houses were all people who lived here, and there was a community, and it wasn't just only a tourist area. But it's fine. This is the nature of what it is. But it is disheartening when you see schools that are closed, and
it is for sure
communities that once were that are no longer. It's just disappointing. And it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, man, the Adirondack Park has so much potential community wise to become this amazing destination hub to just live. But, you need industry, you need these sorts of things. And that's why with the whole, all that COVID work from home stuff, I was like, oh, I hope that this brings people to move here. And now they can, make their real living and also afford a home here. But the housing market is a different beast now. That's for sure.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're from Crown Point. You probably see it there too. You drive through Crown Point and like, you probably think back to what it was like 20, 25 years ago. And now it's like, it's just a different town. Lake Placid, same thing. It's just different now.
It is. And I mean, change is inevitable, right? I mean, we all understand that, but still, that you take great pride, and, change can be really sobering and tough. And, you do see in many, many towns, and, back to Alma Mater, that's what Northwood, that's the name of the school I came up with, Northwood Central, that's what they're facing. And, but we said it as a comedy. So it's actually, how do you make that story a good time? Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think we managed to pull that off.
Great. I love it. No, that's very good.
So it's not too depressing.
Very good. Now, growing up in Crown Point, how many times did you see Champ?
0 times, James. I wish I were.
Where do you fall on that subject? I mean, as a local, you must know, a little bit more than the rest of us. Now, if you're not familiar, Champ is the basically dinosaur that lives in Lake Champlain. We cannot confirm nor deny his existence, but what do you know? Tell me what you know.
I know that the lake is really strange, and there's a lot of debris out there. There are a lot of really large aquatic birds, and I think it's really I want to be a believer, believe me, but I just think it's really easy for people. I can see how people would mistake something as a monster very, very easily. And they're also, I don't know how large the sturgeon population is. I've fished the lake a lot. I've never seen a sturgeon, but I think there's probably a logical explanation.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry to be a buzzkill.
So here's a story you'll appreciate. In middle school, I don't remember if it was like my 7th or 8th grade science teacher, but it was in middle school. One of the teachers had talked about, we were just like talking about Champ and Lake Champlain, and they were talking about how something about like you could petition to, the only way to truly find out would be to drain Lake Champlain and to, see what happens. Right. So not myself, but one of my dudes in my circle started a petition and was going around the school trying to get signatures to eventually send it to the state to drain Lake Champlain to put this behind us, because my teacher somehow alluded to that is what you could do to. You could petition the state if you get the right amount of signatures. So dude was just walking around the school, getting people to sign this piece of paper. But he was, he's dead serious. Like, this is what we're going to do. And then I remember the teacher saying like, yeah, that's not what you're going to do. But okay. It was just one of those days where it's like, did you hear we might drain Lake Champlain? And then of course in school, how the rumor mill goes. It goes from here's a piece of paper to sign to drain Lake Champlain. And by the end, people are saying that we are in fact draining Lake Champlain. Like, this is happening. Good times. Anytime I hear about Champ, that story comes back to my head, and
I can see why. That
makes me chuckle. Good times. So now give me some stories about your 46er journey. You finished them in 2009, you said. What are some highlight reel good moments and bad moments that you remember from that journey?
Well, I would, like I already mentioned, Clifton Redfield. I thought that was the toughest hike of the 46, and the group I was with, which included Seth and Tom and our other friend Sean, was the big debate. We went from Upper Works, we went from Adirondack Lodge, and for whatever reason, I was adamant we going from the lodge, which was a mistake. So we went in from the lodge, and then everybody else wanted to descend down to the Avalanche Lake and go out that way. So I think it was a 20 to 22 mile day, that loop. A thunderstorm hit us when we were coming down from Cliff, and I was in good shape, and it really sapped me, even though I was in great shape at that point. So that was tough. That was I think that was the toughest hike. We finished on Haystack, which was really cool. It was November 7th, 2009. Didn't qualify as a winter hike, but it was very much a winter hike. So that was a great finish. I've done Gothics and Pyramid a few times. One of my favorite peaks. Really enjoyed that hike, and then the whole Lower Great Range is a great hike.
Yep.
A lot of favorites, a lot of good times. Didn't have a great day in the Stewards. It was pretty socked in, but it's also just, the time on the trails with other people that's pretty fun too. The jokes on the trail, which made it into the play, some of which did not make it into the play.
Awesome. Well, that's the thing. So it's like this. It's a journey. So your day on this range is going to be drastically different from someone else's day on that very same range, because of things from weather to times of the year to mishaps. Like, it's just, that's why climbing these mountains and climbing mountains in general, it's such an adventure, because it's always different. And unless you're the type of person that does this regularly or has before been in that world, it's hard to really kind of explain that to people, or to know. It's like, if you go to some event and it's the same thing over and over and over again. So it's like, if you've been there once, you've seen it. Whereas like, you could climb a mountain every day and have 365 different experiences with different things occurring. And obviously sometimes things will be similar, but in general, you just have the opportunity for a totally different adventure, different things. You meet different people. This crazy thing happened. Oh, look at this. Look at the clouds today. There's an inversion. Wow, this is crazy. Like, there's just always something different to happen, which is why, you could there could be a whole podcast where all you do is talk about people's 46er journey, and you're going to get however many episodes, you're going to get that many completely different stories. And that's why it never really gets old to me to hear people's stories in those mountains, or any mountains in general, anything in the outdoors, really.
One of the, I guess if I'm going to tell you a specific story, it was my fourth high peak, which was Big Slide. And I was, you learn a lot as you keep hiking, as James. You get wiser.
Yep.
I started off much more recklessly than others. You're starting to hike at like 11, of course, no big deal.
Sure.
You get to the garden and the lot's full and you have to ride the shuttle. You'll make it back, no big deal. So we did Big Slide, my wife and I. We were not in shape for it. It was a really tough day. And of course, we came out and we missed the shuttle.
Of course.
So, and it's May. The season's first thunderstorm rips through. We're caught out. What do we do? This is before cell phones, I think there were cell phones, but it's not like everyone carried them to the summits at the time. So we're going to have to knock on the door. We're going to have to call for a ride. So I knock on the door. And of course, it's this older gentleman, and he's super friendly, but he's like, I wish I could drive you, but it's after dark and I can't drive. He's like, come on in, you can use my phone. So we sit down, and this guy was just, I start to look around, I see pictures, and I start to talk to him about the high peaks, and I've climbed Marcy, I climbed more than once. So 197 times. I'm just like, wow. So I get his name, which does not ring a bell to me. It's my fourth high peak, and his name is Jim Goodwin.
Aha.
And,
nice.
So I come home, and he was just so nice to us. He offered us, dinner, just such an accommodating guy. And it was a great accident that happened that we missed our shuttle. We got to visit with him that night. So I'm leafing through my guidebooks when I get home and realizing who Jim Goodwin is. So we had a little correspondence for a while. I sent him a nice thank you card, and he sent me a Christmas card with a great note in it. So I still have that. And one of his notes was, I hope you keep climbing, so that was really inspirational for me to run into, a legend like Jim Goodwin.
Yep.
Accidentally like that. And it was definitely a motivator. So that's one little fun story.
No, that's a really cool story. I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. I feel like I hear, that's a fun story. I hear people talk about, running into Gary Koch out on the trail. And I'm just like, these like kind of legendary people that you run into. Obviously they're just regular old people, but there is a small little, not notoriety is probably not the right word, but I guess notoriety. You're just like, you're like a little celebrity, a little local celebrity in a sense, especially for someone like myself and someone like you who like, we have this, awe about the Adirondack Park and the High Peaks and all of these things. So these people are kind of legendary in that regard. And it's cool. It's cool.
And you read, they do things like, Jim Goodwin cut the trail. He cut the Weld Trail, which goes to the call between Sawtooth and Coptic. And I'm up there hiking thinking, the guy I visited with cut this trail. That's amazing. It's so difficult to climb and to think about actually mapping the route and cutting it. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you think to yourself, like, just climbing up the trail was hard, let alone, hey, guess what? There is no trail. Make one and get to the top. It's so wild. But I just think that's the type of thing where you have this, this kind of this feel about the Adirondacks, this respect for it, that these people who have done these crazy things are little celebrities in your own mind. And it's what makes this place special.
Without question. Yeah, I agree.
All right, cool. Well, we're going to start to wrap things up here. So before I end the show, I like to always talk to people and ask them the same 3 questions. So I'm going to ask you too, Kyle, and then we'll sum up and remind people of where they can go to see the play and all that stuff. But 3 questions I like to ask people. 1, what is something that's unique to you that you always have to have in your backpack when you're out hiking? No wrong answer. Just what's something that you just is a must-have?
Oh, geez. I have a water bottle I like to carry that's pretty special to me, Sometimes I hike with cold pizza instead of a sandwich. I get tired of sandwiches, which is strange, I guess. So, I wish I had something. I wish I had a cooler answer for you. But
no, that's a fantastic answer. Fantastic answer. Cold pizza hits hard always. It's also a perfect trail food because it packs just fine. And it's just quick carbs, quick energy, and it hits the dopamine that we need when we're on top of it.
For sure. Yep.
All right, great. My second question is, what do you think makes the Adirondacks a unique place?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously, the simple answer is the access to all this amazing wilderness. We're so lucky that I can drive just a few minutes, even from where I live in Ty, and be on a trail and be in nature. It's really incredible, the access that we have and how the size of the park, the scope of it, that you can fit. I don't know how many national parks inside the Adirondacks, but more than one, I think more than 3 or 4. But I also think, the people are kind of special too. And I think sometimes that gets a little bit overlooked, So I think that the people are special, and we have, we're talking about our schools and things like that. I think, our communities have their own little caveats, have their own little qualities that are super admirable and unique. So I would say people in the wilderness.
Sure.
As an answer.
No, it's a fantastic answer. Now, my final question to you becomes, why do you hike? What is it about going out into the mountains that keeps you going back? And then for you, let's make it even more specific. What was it about the Adirondacks that made you say, I'm going to write now multiple plays that are here, take place here? There's obviously something that's beyond surface level special about it for you.
Yeah, I guess it's tough to put my finger on that. I guess I would say it's probably innately just the sense of home, the sense of home. And then I know that I'm consciously writing about the Adirondacks, but on the other hand, I'm not, if that makes sense at all. I think it's probably just this sense of, this is where I live. This is, kind of part of my being. And that just kind of comes out in the writing, so.
Yeah, I can relate.
Sense of home.
I can relate very much to that instinct. Yeah. It's what I know. So it's what I write about. And it's what I see when I go out my door. And it's why, I live a weird, crazy lifestyle that involves a lot of time on I-87. Although half the hikers that listen to this podcast probably spend just as much time coming back and forth
I'm sure
themselves, but we go in different
Yeah.
directions.
Yep.
It is what it is. And the ADK is a type of place too, where you can never tell its story. You can never finish telling the stories that it can tell. And I just think that there's something special to that.
I would agree.
Cool. All right. So give us another quick rundown of where and when they can see the play, what the cost was, and all that stuff.
Okay, so the show again is called Times Square. It's set in the Santanoni Range. Show is January 26th and 27th. It's a world premiere original show. Showtime for both nights is 7 p.m. And tickets are available at the door. $10 for adults, $8 for students, and then we have a family rate of $30. So hoping to see a lot of people there. And I hope, fellow 46ers or just people who are into the outdoors who are interested in high peaks and hiking, I hope they come up and say hello after, I'm the tall, bald guy who wrote the show. It's kind of hard to miss me, so I'll be there and hopefully get to chat with some of your listeners. That'd be great.
All right, great. Well, Kyle, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. That's going to wrap up this first episode here in 2024. Thanks to all of you for being here for another year of the 46 of 46 podcast. Lots of big things are in the works in my world in terms of the 46 of 46 podcast, 46 Outdoors, and all the different kind of Adirondack endeavors that I am a part of that all of you support, and I thank you very much for that support. But let's have a fantastic year. That's going to do it. Check back on Fridays for new mountains, new stories, new guests, and new episodes right here on the 46 of 46 podcast. And let's say it again. Remember to always leave no trace, do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. See you on the trails, everybody.